Welcome back. Tonight I'm obsessed with the old adage, better late than never, because late doesn't appear to be better by much. Consider former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. In a speech in New Jersey last night, Kelly laid out in the clearest terms yet his misgivings about Trump's words and actions regarding North Korea, illegal immigration, military discipline, Ukraine, and the news media. So one of the people who worked most closely alongside the president now has something to say, just like former National Security Advisor John Bolton did when he wrote his tell-all book, just like former Trump fixer Michael Cohen did as he headed off to prison. They didn't speak out while they were in a position to do something, but later, when there was far less risk. And they're not alone, not by a long shot. They are joined by a long line of former Trump associates and staffers who are revealing how bad things really were once it all ended badly. Now, some of these folks would argue that they didn't speak up at the time because they thought they could help manage the president, prevent him from his worst instincts. Then there were those who did speak up when they did have something to lose. There's people like Alexander Vindman. He was called to testify by Congress. It's called a subpoena, surely knowing he could have lost his job, but he still did it when it mattered. There's people like Mitt Romney. He's about to weather a relentless political firestorm for his impeachment vote. His family will too. But he still did it when it mattered. For the others, I just simply have two questions. If you had a second chance, would you speak out? And would you encourage others to do the same if they're having these misgivings currently with them? That's a question I hope folks pose to those folks, and I can't wait for that answer. After all, better late than never. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.